Hello there and welcome to, my recap video of the 11th round of the candidates. Now, I'm just going to whip through the game between Alekseenko and Wang Hao. This game doesn't really mean much when it comes to the final standings. Neither of these players have any chance. They played the Italian game, and actually Wang Hao played, interestingly, he played g5 here. Just going for it. They have nothing to lose, so why not? Knight to f1, g4, because why not? Knight back to d2, and now he opened up with d5. Knight e3, and he grabbed the bishop pair. White allowed him to take it. I guess we could have played bishop. No, if we go bishop e5, c6, and the pawn drops. So we get the bishop pair. So black is playing, it's kind of a modern way, he's damaging his pawn structure a bit, committing a lot to the pawns, but he has the bishop pair. So h5, fortifying, and maybe, there's not going to be much of an attack, to be honest, and actually white has a firm grip on the f5 square. So black now castles, pressure on f7. Excuse me. And bishop a6, pressure on c4. So white blocks. Now pressure on d3, we block it with c4. This pawn was hanging. More pressure, but knight d5. Defending tactically. If c6, I guess bishop to b4, and we have to play c5. So the knight is safe on d5. So the bishop goes back, and he goes for f5. Bishop b4 to force c5, so we, get the knight on d5, but this knight can be undermined. And this looks a bit better for black. Seems though he can't really take this pawn, because here and these pawns start to drop. So he went queen g6, intending to take it with the rook on d5, I guess. And Alekseenko went for the counterplay. He's down a pawn at the moment, but we don't have a lot of pieces left. And now, if the white queen, the black queen starts to move, b6 is hanging. And Wang Hao tried to find something. He made a lot of checks, and eventually started to push his pawns. More checks. Basically, just trying to gain some time to think about things. But here, it doesn't seem to be much in this, and eventually a draw was agreed here. So, not a boring game in any way, but a game that didn't mean much when it comes to the final standings. This one, however, meant a lot. And this is the game between Nepomniachtchi and Fabiano Caruana. Now, Fabiano, most of the guys need to do something to catch up with Nepo. He was leading with 1 point, 1 full point ahead of Caruana, MVL, and Giri. So, if Fabiano can cook up something with black, then that would be fantastic. So we have the 4 knights. That's not very common at the highest level, and the Scotch 4 knights. And this doesn't have the sharpest reputation. So it seems like the game plan for Nepo was to basically draw this game. I think bishop b4, bishop d3. Takes and bishop d3, d5, and here. The main move is take on d5, and black usually takes back with a pawn. And this is rather dry with the high number of draws, and white is risking very little. But Caruana castled, so he turned this into a little bit of gambit. The downside of that is that this gambit doesn't really promise all that much, and after we have some trades, we see that white is still up a pawn. He can hang on to the pawn. But what's going to happen after bishop g6, which is a novelty? I found one game where black played queen c5. That game was also drawn. But we can see that, the position is starting to liquidate. Queen c5 check, king h1. It's useful to put the king in the corner. It's further away once we get an endgame. And also the back rank could be weak. Now we take on e4, rook c8, and we win the c6 pawn. And the pawns just drop off. Now we have 3 against 3. The queens came off, and black's gonna round up the 8 pawn eventually. But He had to give up the h pawn to do that. White wasn't willing to part with the a pawn without getting the h pawn. And then we have a simple 2 against 2, a dead draw. So I think Nepo got what he wanted. He wanted to draw, he got it. And now we move on to games that were a little bit more juicy. So first off, Alexander Grischuk against Maxim Vasilyev. Grischuk kind of fell out of contention when he lost against Alekseenko. But MVL could use a win here. And we have this queen takes d4 line that Magnus played, I think against Wojtaszek, where he put the queen back on d2 and fianchettoed the queenside bishop and castled queenside. And that's what we have here, queenside fianchetto. And this is sort of an educated way to meet this, to place a pin on this pawn and put some pressure. But white is meeting it with knight e2. We have long castles. So the battle lines are drawn. We have opposite side castling. Black king on the king side, the white king on the queen side. a4, queen b6. Yeah, a4 seems like a usual move to stop black from attacking. Otherwise, black might play a4. Even sack the exchange, and the lines open. But a4 seems to keep things close because we can, stop everything here. And once we move this knight, there's even more blockage on b5. Queen b6, and now white goes for it with h4, trying to open up the h file, and he manages to do so with h5. Knight takes g3. f4, was under some attack there. Knight to b4, bishop h3. We have a trade, and Grischuk now pushes with h4. Now MVL went back to f6. If he takes on f4, I guess he wasn't very happy with white being able to, at some stage, to play knight d5 and open up this diagonal, and that coupled with white, being able to put everything on the h file, doesn't seem like a good thing for black. So he tried to keep things close as much as he could, but g5, knight h5, and now the pawns are coming. Okay, we have to make a square for the bishop, so rook d8, and the bishop got a square. But now we have to avoid scary stuff on the h file. So Grischuk tries to open the h file because, that's the avenue of attack here. d5 takes on g3 first, and then take on h5, yeah. So h5 is to close the h file. If we take here, king h7, and the fight is closed. But Grischuk, he wants to sack on h5, and that's no secret. Take on d5 and rook h1. So now he wants to sack on h5 and give mate on h7. h7 or h8. Queen d6. Now if we sack on h5, you have to be careful. Queen takes. Now there's rook d1, and there's a trade, and we're not mating. Okay. So after queen d6, king a2. Rook d1. Now we took on h5. And we have to take with the rook because he would take with the queen. There's captures on h1. White could have played rook h3 actually. And he gets a chance to do it again here. After the excellent rook d4, he goes back to h1. And here black could have gone rook d1 again. But then we go rook h3. Black has to go to queen e6 and sack for the rook. Instead, rook takes a4 was played. If takes, then we take the rook. So king to b1, queen d5, and now queen h5. And you have to give up the queen, otherwise it's mate. But you have two rooks. You are, however, losing the e5 pawn and the b7 pawn. And we're able to do that because if rook takes, it's going to be check, king to the h file, check, and we pick up the rook. So you can't take the bishop on e5. It's indirectly protected. The bishop has to c3, rook e2, queen c8. Check, double, but Grischuk is getting the pawn on a5. And after this trade here, we get an endgame that actually looks winning for Grischuk, and probably it is. Starts to push the pawns, and nothing that MVL can do, and he resigned. So quite an up and down game. Unfortunately, it didn't mean all that much to Grischuk, but it effectively ends the chances of MVL. And well, even if he wins the remaining games, it might not be enough, but he will do his best. Anyhow, the last game was, well, the game of the day definitely. Anish Giri against Ding Liren. So, Anish opened with e4, and no surprise, e5 by Ding, who likes to play the Spanish. a6, bishop to a4, knight to f6, castles, bishop e7, and here Anish Giri surprises Ding probably a little bit. He takes on c6, the delayed exchange variation. Now, by doing that, White has avoided some lines that Black might play against the exchange variation, such as bishop g4, you know, the line where you go h3, h5. Also, the lines where Black goes for an early f6. Those are out of the question. So you have to play something else. And these lines resemble, you know, lines you get in the anti-Berlin a little bit. But Giri goes for this knight maneuver here. At the queen e7, puts the knight on a5. This is an annoying pressure on b7 and c6. Black elects to castle, protecting the pawn. But now we have opposite side castling. And, well, Ding, he goes for it in this game. c3, c5, a3, c6, b4. White is going for it on the queen side. Bishop c7, okay, the knight must retreat. And now knight d7. This makes way for the f-pawn, which Black will now push. f5, very, very powerful. Now this sacrifices the pawn on c5. But there's queen f7, hitting the knight on b3. And f takes e4 is actually quite good for Black here. He might even be better. He's going to put pressure on f3 and he's going to be fine. But again, Ding really went for it with g5. Takes, and again he went for it. But queen takes f5 was the prudent choice. We keep the pressure here. Next move we take this, then we put a rook on f8, and we're putting a lot of pressure on White. Instead, Ding played g4, which would be very good if White didn't have knight g5 and h4, and this keeps the king side closed. g3 hangs the bishop, there's no g-file opening up, and the knight has this beautiful e4 square. b6, and now Giri takes over and sacrifices a piece. Ding accepts. And now this brilliant line opening move, b takes c5. And the fact that White has this trump, pawn to d4 and threatening this, makes things actually unbearable for Black. Queen b2 is also on the agenda in some cases, moving the knight. Knight f6 was played, and now Giri opens up with knight d6. It's down a piece here, but the floodgates are opening. d4, queen takes a6 is threatened, and remarkably, Black is just totally lost here. He tried to play c5, but after knight takes e5, rook e8, and queen to c4, he actually resigned. There's nothing to be done. I don't know what Black can do here really. And you see that, you know, the knight is, the bishop on h5 is completely out of the game. And the king is just, you know, butt naked here in the middle of the board. So there's just no defense. For instance, you know, let's try to run, just do something. Then we just, you know, we introduce the heavy pieces and it's just going to be game over. Nothing to be done. So, is this the best line though? Rook b6, I'm not sure. Yeah, king e7, rook b7 or something. Yeah, great game by Giri. Like, it looked like in the opening, you know, not much was going to happen, you know, typical anti-Berlin. But then they both went for it, opposite side castling, and the piece sack with 94, yeah, that was great. 95 and h4 was great, and the piece sack. And this really gives, you know, Giri some chances. He's now half a point behind Nepo. The bad news is that Nepo holds the tiebreak over Giri, I believe. So Giri will still need some help, but if he plays, you know, like he's been doing, especially in the last two games with White, you know, he still has a chance. And 3 rounds to go, and, well, I guess only time will tell. Thanks for watching. See you next time.